Hello there. As you can see, this is a little bit different to your usual Let's Talk About. There's no me just sat on a sofa talking about something here and there. Instead, as you can see, there's some gameplay, some exciting visuals as well as my voice talking. It should probably be noted, if you couldn't tell by the title, this is going to be about Doom 3. And mainly focusing on why people don't like Doom 3 so much. I'm going to be completely honest. I'll get it over and done with right now. I love Doom 3. Doom 3 is probably one of my all-time favourite video games. I absolutely love it. It's probably my second favourite Doom game of them all. Yes, I do think it's better than Doom 2016, but only by a slight adjustment. And, you know, it's not as good as Doom 2, mind you, Doom 2 Hell on Earth, but it's still a very good game, in my humble opinion. Obviously, other people can have different opinions here and there, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Instead, let's just talk about mainly why people don't like Doom 3 as much, and my theories on why, using some facts here and there to discuss the reasons for it. I do apologise if the gameplay footage isn't the most exciting. I will be completely honest, I'm just being lazy here. I'm just using the old intro video which I made, I think it was a few years back now, just for the sake of making a video really, that was. Not because it had any purpose whatsoever. But I digress. So, let's get the obvious straight away, why people don't like Doom 3 as much as any of the other Doom games. It's different. That's basically one of the biggest reasons why. It's different. When you play, say, Doom, or Doom 2, or Doom 2016, you get this feel that Doom is not necessarily a horror game. I know this makes some people might get a little bit iffy over that statement, but let's be honest now, Doom isn't really a horror game per se. Yes, it has horror elements from, you know, demons from hell invading and killing people on a mass scale, and horrific abominations, you know, here and there trying to rip you apart. But Doom, for me at least, is more of an action game than a horror game. It's an action fantasy game, and it's quite over the top if you think about it. You know, Doom Guy can quite literally get a berserker pack and punch a demon so it just becomes nothing but a bit of gore. You know, you have demons quite literally killing each other if they get hit even slightly by another's projectile. You know, you got this giant floating head, more or less, this giant floating head with one eye called a cacodemon with a big fat grin on its face. You know, the reason why Doom Guy wants to kill every single demon is because his pet rabbit got decapitated and put on a spike. You know, Doom isn't necessarily a serious game when you get down to it. You know, and Doom 2016 in particular acknowledges this. Yeah, it has a somewhat serious tone to, say, the story perhaps, but it also embraces the insanity of the series. It embraces the over-the-top goofiness that Doom is, while at the same time making it fucking awesome. Doom 3 is completely different. Its tone is completely different. It's horror-based action later. You know, it's more focused on creating a more darker, more menacing atmosphere. You know, when you're playing the game, it's more slow. It's not as fast-paced. You're not like dodging projectiles. You know, you're basically trapped in a corridor as these creatures come out of nowhere, jump at you, and will tear you apart. It's more horror-based, you know, and for me personally, I don't have a problem with this. You know, I don't have a problem with the fact that Doom 3 is more horror-based as opposed to more action-based. It's a different spin to the Doom franchise, and honestly, it's a decent one. It's done well enough for me to appreciate it. The story is more or less the same. You know, you got a Marine that's been sent to Mars, and of course they're doing teleportation. Of course, as a result, they accidentally teleport to Hell, and Hell is teleported back to Mars and invades the base, possessing most of the staff there, and demons obviously come through and try to take over and kill everyone alive or within the base. That's a very basic summary of the main Doom story. Basically a science experiment gone wrong scenario. But Doom 3 obviously takes that and gives it a more realistic and more horror approach to it. You're more isolated. You don't get, bullets given to you every second. You don't get loads of health given to you every second. Instead, you have to actively survive and get to these, valuable objects, such as ammo, such as health, before you can even move on. And, Doom 3 does punish the player for trying to take the normal route, i.e. just blast everything with your gun and hope for the best. Because Doom 3 takes things slowly. It takes things very slowly. I've seen it quite a few times in quite a few reviews online for Doom 3 that, the best part of Doom 3 is the second half of the game, where it does feel more like the original Doom, where you have a lot of ammo, a lot of health, and you can just blast your way through everything that moves. But I feel like the first half of the game in particular gets such a bad reputation for being more slow, for being more horror-based, being more, methodical about it. And it's a real shame, because it does a really good job, and it's so underappreciated for that. Although saying that when Doom 3 was initially released, it was very positive, everyone loved it. So why has it changed all of a sudden? Well, that's where another reason comes in. Half-Life 2. Half-Life 2 was released, I think, a year or within the same year as Doom 3. They were the two big games that were being released, and of course id Software, they had revolutionary technology in terms of the lighting effects, and overall, effects in general in Doom 3, whereas Half-Life, was utilising, with the graphics as well being better, but not only that, they also had the physics engine being put into place, and both these games were trying to be revolutionary. They were both forcing themselves to, revolutionise the game industry forever. And Doom 3 did it successfully for a short while. And then Half-Life 2 came out, and Doom 3 sort of just got forgotten about. I always remember seeing Doom 3 in-game, which is a store over in the UK. I always remember seeing the Hell Knight image on the front covers, and it's one of the best covers in my opinion. I just love seeing the Hell Knight there, because it brings about the horror elements as well as, it brings about the horror elements as well as informing the gamers or anyone who's going to be buying it, the consumers, I guess you could say, that this is going to be a really horror-based game, and with the title of Doom right there, you can instantly recognise it. With Half-Life 2 on the other hand, Half-Life is much younger if you think about it. The first game was released in 98 and then, and was much younger than, say, Doom. So Half-Life could really get away with, upgrading and being more revolutionary, being more, different, whereas Doom sort of couldn't, if you think about it. Doom already made a name for itself. Everyone knows what Doom is. It's a bit like taking, Quake and then turning Quake into, I don't know, some Fortnite-like game. It would not work because people wouldn't like it, and it definitely would not fit in with Quake whatsoever. Or, turning Quake into something like a, like Resident Evil. People would not like it because it's not Quake. It wouldn't be Quake. People would prefer to see something like Quake 1 or Quake 2, or even Quake 3 instead. So Doom obviously being completely different, but also having a big challenger really affected Doom 3. And Half-Life 2 is still remembered today, and Doom 3 does get a lot of, it get a lot of good memories, a lot of great, appreciation here and there, but in comparison to Half-Life 2, it is more forgotten about. It is more like, yeah, there's Doom 3, it happened once. Yeah, just had to check there, I was recording. So, I can understand where some of that could come from, but not only that, you then start diving in a bit more deep and you realise that Doom 3 more or less felt like it was competing against Half-Life 2 instead of just being, its own thing. And it's further exemplified in the expansion pack, Resurrection of Evil, whereby they literally have their own version of a gravity gun. And you cannot deny that that certainly feels a lot like Half-Life. So you can understand where some of the sentiments, the hatred for said game comes from. So I think the differences is what makes it so disliked. I think the difference in gameplay, in atmosphere, is definitely what makes it different. But I also think the competition against Half-Life 2 was also an issue. But then again, this is another issue that Doom 3 has, and that is the popularity. Popularity can be a curse for a lot of things, something that can be very popular and, the popularity can be like forced in your face every so often, can often be disastrous. And, I think if you judge something because it's popular, it's a stupid excuse to hate it. Personally, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, an example would be Razor from Robot Wars, whereby people don't like it because it's popular. It's stupid. It's a bit like hating rich people because they're rich, not because they did something scummy. No, it's because they have too much money. It's, those are ridiculous reasons. But with Doom 3, it also suffered from that similar fate. Doom 3 was extremely popular, and it was shoved in a lot of people's faces. I did just say, yeah, it didn't do as well as Half-Life 2, because Half-Life 2 basically stole the spotlight. But saying that, Doom 3 still left an impact, After Doom 3's released, if I remember rightly, they had like phone games and arcade games which were more based on Doom 3 as opposed to the original Doom, or any other Doom material for that matter. You also had the Doom movie. That movie. Not very positive to speak about said movie, but and the new one looks even worse, funnily enough. But I digress. You had the Doom movie, which was more based on Doom 3 than any other Doom game. Like, it has low lighting. The Pinky is the Pinky from Doom 3. The Imp is the Imp from Doom 3. The Hell Knight is the Hell Knight from Doom 3. And, as I was saying, they had mobile games and I believe arcade games. I might be wrong about that. But they had those sort of games which used Doom 3 style weapons and Doom 3 enemies. Like, for a while, and even like posters and all that, and artwork stuff for Doom merchandise was all centered around Doom 3. For a while, Doom 3 was the Doom game, and it sort of took the spotlight away from the original Doom for, it wasn't a long period, but it was long enough to leave a bit of an impact. What I mean by not long enough, but long enough, I'd say, estimating the dates a bit, I'd say from 2003 to 2008, if I can estimate correctly. Around those sort of years was when Doom 3's popularity was at its highest. And I think the issue is, because it was so popular and because it was like so forced in front of everyone's faces, it was like the Doom game that everyone now knew about, people who were hardcore fans of the original felt sort of like, what's going on? What about the old Doom? Like, has everyone forgotten about that? Why is everyone talking about this new one, this weird one, which is completely different? you know, I'm convinced that a lot of people probably thought that Doom was now just this horror game with, you know, this marine on his own in a dark area through these isolated corridors fighting, you know, monsters here and there. And, you know, it's about survival. You're trapped in a room full of monsters, you know. That's probably what people would have perceived. And years later, when you have, you know, Doom 4/2016 come out, and it went back to its older roots, and the fact that nowadays people more or less think about the older Doom games, you know, not that we had Brutal Doom and other Doom mods that were released, you know, around the same time and after Doom 3, that sort of like made it more obvious how different Doom 3 was in comparison to the other Doom games, how different it is, how it is the black sheep of the Doom family. But that said, it shouldn't be ignored. It's not necessarily canon to the rest of the Doom games, which are more or less all connected. This is one that exists in its own realm, but it also does its own thing, and it's unique, and I believe it deserves, you know, attention here and there. It certainly deserves the attention, I should say, and appreciation. But I think there's also some other minor bits here and there. You may have heard me mention about the darkness, and boy, is the darkness in Doom 3 one of the biggest criticisms that the game got. And even though it was basically the main point of the game, people love to complain about things that were meant to be implemented, but, you know, they're too busy, you know, moaning about this purposely implemented system. And Doom 3 is a very dark game. Like, there are moments where it's more or less pitch black and you cannot see shit. Even if you have the flashlight on, you cannot see anything. And the fact that you actually have a flashlight was also another pain in the ass, because, you know, imagine you have to bring out the flashlight, you have like an imp or a trite or something, you know, about to pounce on you. You have to then manually put away your flashlight, which puts you in the dark, and then shoot the creature dead. And I can understand why people would get pissed off at that. Now, I, for one, understand that it is all part of the gameplay. It's all part of the idea of, you know, making it a more horror-based game, making it more, you know, different to the other Doom games. And I can appreciate that, you know, and I think people do sort of overreact a bit, and I think it adds a level of challenge to the game. And I know some people also complain that the game is too challenging. And I can understand. There are moments where the game does get too challenging. I know for a fact that near towards the end, you will be like thrown in an area where there's 3 Hell Knights quite literally surrounding you, and you have to somehow survive them or just run away. I mean, if you... I believe it's in levels of caverns where the Hell Knights like spawn, and you either have to run or just fight them. But then again, at the same time, I think that also gives the player some choice. The player has a choice to fight them or just run away, which isn't necessarily the most favourable ideas, but when you're low on health and health is hard to get and so is ammo, it's an ideal situation. But I can also understand where some of the complaints about difficulty can come into. I know there are some areas in the game which downright piss me off, and I will admit, I do get pissed off in these areas, where they will have like a room, and this room will fill up with these enemies known as trites, which are like little spider things with upside down heads, human heads. And I can understand why people would get annoyed by such moments, because they literally swarm you and you have to fight them off. But one of the other things that Doom 3 does, because it wants to be realistic and dark, is that as a result of, you know, you being attacked by one trite and then another, your screen is shaking and you can't really fire your gun at them. And this can happen like with any enemy, for example. An enemy can hit you and you'll sway a bit and you can't fire your gun and the enemy will attack you again. There's no like delay, if you know what I mean. There's no like programming to say, oh well, the enemy has to give the player a chance to fight back a bit and then it will attack you. You know, it's not like Doom 2016 where, you know, sometimes the enemies will actually let the player reload and then go into attack, but it's so quick that it does it in a way that it doesn't like make it too easy for the player. It also gives them a tiny bit of challenge. But Doom 3, on the other hand, they'll just attack and attack and attack. And talking about the enemies, I've seen this quite a lot. The enemies in Doom 3 are very dull looking. When you look at the enemies in the other Doom games, you see how colourful and how vibrant and how brilliant looking they are. And then in Doom 3, they're all these pale white or grey creatures. The Imp is this grey creature with insect eyes. The Vulgar is this grey creature. You know, the Mancubus is this grey white creature. The Hell Knight is this big grey white creature. The Cacodemon is this pale looking creature. It's like, even the Pinky is this pale looking creature. You know, almost all the enemies in the game are more or less the same. You know, they may have moulded the model a bit, like, made it a bit more beefier, like for the Pinkies or the Hell Knights, or they've beefed up the, or they've like shrunken it down a bit. It's like, a lot of these characters, or a lot of these enemies, feel the same and look the same, and I will admit, I did get quite confused with some of the creatures, the Wraiths and the Imps. Like, I will admit, I got confused with the Imps and the Wraiths sometimes because I'd think, oh, I'm fighting an Imp, so I'm gonna just dodge out of the way and then shoot at it every time it throws its fireball, except it doesn't throw its fireball. It's a Wraith, and it teleports away and then teleports in front of you to slash at you, you know. So you can't even, you can't even prepare to fight it, if you know what I mean. But then again, if you think about it in the sense that it's meant to be a horror game, if it's meant to be, you know, this dark, more realistic version of Doom, it sort of makes sense, you know. At least with like the Hell Knights, the Cacodemons and the Mancubuses, they are more obviously different creatures, but though they're dull looking, they're more obvious looking creatures. You know, it's the human-sized creatures like the Imps and the Wrath, and the Vulgars, which are all very similar, that cause the problems. So I can understand those criticisms, you know. Those criticisms are valid and definitely truthful. You know, I do apologise for all the creaking sound from the camera there. It's really annoying. It just won't stop moving. But as a whole, Doom 3 is definitely different. And that's the whole point of it. It was meant to be a more horror, more realistic based Doom game as opposed to the over-the-top action-packed Doom. You know, Doom Guy isn't, you know, this big, muscular, you know, blonde, angled chin individual. Instead, he's this dark-haired, quite scrawny-looking, you know, Marine. Still well built, but, you know, he isn't like the Doom Guy we know. And I think these differences aren't there to be, you know, an insult to completely reboot Doom. It was there to more or less give you a different interpretation of Doom. You know, it's not a part of the canon at all, but it still gives you a taste or a representation of what Doom could be like if it was like this. You know, we see parodies of Doom all the time, you know. I'm not saying, you know, parodies are necessarily going to happen one day, you know, there's not going to be a comedy version of Doom, but if there were, would people react angrily to it, or would they react, you know, happy towards it, because it would embrace the insanity? You know, Doom 2016 is more action-based and has no horror whatsoever. You know, but it also contains a techno sort of music as opposed to your, dubstep I guess you could argue, sort of music instead of the heavy metal, you know, grunge sort of music that you hear normally. And Doom 3, it's, you know, I'm just saying that the Doom series has gone through a lot of differences and a lot of different interpretations. And in some ways, if Doom 2016 was going to be like the original plans for Doom 4, which was, you know, Call of Doomy, which I'm sure would have pissed off a lot of people, like I said, it could have pissed off a lot of people, or it could have been accepted, you know. I think the fact that they didn't go for that route and they went back to what made Doom great again, certainly helped the Doom franchise, but also hindered Doom 3 significantly, because Doom 3 is now looking even more awkward than normal, you know. It literally is the only Doom game that isn't like the other Doom games. And in some senses it's fine, but in others it's not, because it means that Doom 3 is alone, essentially, and is underappreciated, but in other ways it allows Doom 3 to be unique. It allows Doom 3 to be the one to give you a different interpretation, and I think that is why I certainly enjoyed Doom 3 a lot. You know, I won't say that it is, you know, completely flawless. I did go quite as far to say that I do find it my second favourite Doom game of them all. You know, Doom 2 Hell on Earth is still my all-time favourite because it's just awesome, but Doom 3 deserves the appreciation it gets. You know, it's not like your usual Doom game, but it is certainly a different interpretation, and I think, for one thing, that's fine, and it shouldn't be a problem, but then again, that's just me. Tell me what you think of Doom 3. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you think it is underappreciated? And I'll see you next time.